This is the first time the Kremlin has said this. Putin reacted to Trump's statement. Will the Kremlin agree to end the war? Let's discuss it in the stream. With you, Anastasia Noritsyna and Sergei Jirnov, ex-employee of the USSR KGB and the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service. Sergei Olegovich, hello. Hello, Anastasia. Friends, post your comments and questions. We're working live. Don't forget to specify which country. Give it a like. The Kremlin commented on Trump's ultimatum on the Ukraine deal. Putin's spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, spoke about Putin's reaction to Trump's threats to impose duties and sanctions on Russia if it does not agree to a deal on Ukraine. Waiting for signals that haven't come in yet. He said the Kremlin dictator is ready for an equal dialogue, just like in the last presidential term. Trump issued an ultimatum to the Kremlin, urging Putin to prepare to end the war in Ukraine. Nothing seems to have been finalized yet, unfortunately. Sergei Olegovich, what does equal dialogue mean? The Kremlin didn't ignore Trump's threat. On the contrary, it impressed it. Otherwise, they would have kept quiet. The story of Trump's tweet is very ambiguous. The more I think about it and reread it, the more it seems that Trump wants to derail the talks with Putin. You correctly said it was an ultimatum. Putin does not like ultimatums. He makes them himself, as in December 2021, but he does not tolerate being given them. Anyone who has worked with Putin knows that it is pointless to pressure him. When Putin is under pressure, he shuts down, stops reacting and making decisions. If you look at the form, anything Trump wrote on social media could be perceived as normal by Putin. If Trump had called Putin and said this in a secret conversation, even better would be if Trump and Putin had a bath and over a beer, Trump would say, Vovik, the war is idiotic. The economy is at its worst. You need to... end this case because people are dying. I love you in Russia. I don't want it to do anything extra, but if you make me, I will. Then everything Trump wrote could go away. But Trump didn't do it in the bathhouse or on the phone. He wrote it publicly, putting Putin on the spot. Trump actually humiliated Putin by saying, we have to end this idiotic war. Trump publicly told Putin, Vovik, we have to end the idiotic war, effectively calling him an idiot and blaming him for the failure that leads to a bad economy. Imagine Putin expecting Trump to sit down with him at the negotiating table and decide the fate of the world and spheres of influence. Your North America, my Eurasia, and so on. Suddenly, Trump publicly declares to the world Putin is an idiot and started an idiotic war. How do you think Putin, who has spent 3 years talking about the importance of war, its goals, and fighting the West, NATO, and Ukraine, would take it? Trump says your war is idiotic. On first reading it yesterday, it didn't cut it for me. 24 hours later, I realized that this text is terrible for Putin. It could lead to Putin thinking, why would I sit down at a table with Trump, who calls me an idiot and says my war is idiotic and everything I've done is for nothing? Moreover, he threatens that if Putin doesn't comply, he will feel bad. Take your pick. Will it be done too badly or just badly? If I were Putin, I would consider this text to be an ultimatum that puts him in a stupor and gives him no opportunity to respond. He must make that no text pretend there is no text. Trump isn't talking about anything at all, and as you said, that's exactly the response we got. It wasn't Putin who came out, but Peskov, which usually happens when Putin has nothing to say. When Putin has something to say, he himself comes out and speaks at length into the microphone. When he has something to say, he will repeat the same thing for weeks, inviting his favorite correspondent, Zarubin. And here Peskov said there's nothing to comment on yet, because there's nothing new. Biden didn't explicitly tell Putin he was waging an idiotic war. Trump talked about an idiotic war, but in the abstract. Trump used the same phrase when talking about both Putin and Zelensky. It cut to the eye, because when Trump talked about both sides going to war, it sounded odd. How can you call a war on the part of Ukraine idiotic if the country is defending itself from attack? Even if you don't want to fight a war, you were forced by circumstances because you were attacked. Ukraine cannot ignore the war because it was attacked and is defending its sovereignty and territorial integrity. This statement by Trump is idiotic because it equates the aggressor and the victim, claiming it's an idiotic war on both sides. Trump has only said this in relation to Putin, but publicly, not in a secret conversation. And I think so, the further I go, I think this publication is actually going to derail Trump's talks with Putin. There may have been a secret phone call. Trump realized Putin wasn't willing to go along with the terms. Yes, that seems to be the case. It's been talked about, by the way. Lots of rumors and speculation circulating. We'll never know if it was or not. Peskov said there was no conversation, but when he says something, you have to flip it the other way around. So there was a conversation, and probably more than one. There was one conversation in November and one in late December. Recently, Trump also articulated his attitude. Putin started talking about Rurikhovich and the importance of war for Russia, calling it sacred. The people around Trump realized there would be no settlement in 24 hours, either before or after he took office.
Да, что никакого урегулирования за 24 часа ни до вступления Трампа в должность, ни даже после вступления в должность не будет.
When Trump signed the documents, he was asked about the settlement in 24 hours, and he guffawed.
Трамп подписывал всякие бумажки, ему задают вопрос, ну а как там урегулирование за 24 часа? А он отшучивается.
That's not a good answer for Trump.
В общем, не самый лучший ответ.
If he's guffawing, then he doesn't have an answer. Now we realize that there are difficulties, and above all with Putin. We have said many times that Putin cannot be intimidated or persuaded because he is determined. He's cuckoo, and it's pointless to talk to him rationally. I was saying that Trump and anyone hoping for pressure or persuasion are wrong, because Putin is very stubborn and never admits his mistakes. He lives in his own world, where that doesn't exist. We should not expect any negotiations to take place. I said that if negotiations take place, Putin will not sit at the table with Zelensky. He's already said there is no President Zelensky for him. He's illegitimate, he's out of office, and the war is an excuse. He is ready to talk to Verkhovna Rada. For him, the Speaker of the Verkhovna Rada is the only legitimate politician in Ukraine with whom one can have a conversation. With Trump, he will not talk about Ukraine, because for Putin, the Ukraine issue has already been resolved. There are his terms of surrender. Ukraine either accepts them or there is no talk for Putin. With Trump, Putin wanted him to recognize surrender and cut off aid to Ukraine to bring the country to its knees and force it to accept Putin's terms. For Putin, the very fact of talks with Trump was important to show that they are on the same level and decide the fate of the world. Trump recognizes me for the kind of politician I am. That was his interest. I believe Putin will win these negotiations because he will likely brainstorm with Trump, not the other way around.
С моей точки зрения, гораздо больше вероятности, что Путин заштампует мозги Трампу, а не Трамп Путину.
He needs these talks to manipulate Trump and possibly stall for time. But for him, there is no Ukrainian issue. That is, with Trump we can only talk about sanctions and getting Russia back on track. Trump's publication closes that question. What will Trump do if he derails the talks? Trump, speaking at Davos Online, said he would push Saudi Arabia and OPEC to lower oil prices in order to pressure Russia on Ukraine. If the price of oil falls, the war in Ukraine will end. Nothing new about this. I was surprised by Trump's trip. He just took office and already went somewhere on video. If by video, okay, I couldn't imagine him getting on an airplane and flying to Europe. It's nice for him to speak on video because he's the new president and everyone listens to him. I don't think he's going to say anything new because everything you quoted has already been said many times by Trump. This is his fix-it idea, that Russia needs to be crushed. The story of lower oil prices is important not only for Russia, but also for the U.S., because Trump believes that falling world prices will lead to lower gasoline and diesel prices in America, which will help fulfill his promise to reduce inflation.
Рикошетом цены на бензин и на дизтопливо, и таким образом внутри то, что он, так сказать, продавал американцам, что я снижу инфляцию, когда приду к власти, я для вас снижу цены, там и так далее и тому подобное.
There's nothing new in that sense.
Пока что нового ничего нет.
What will Trump do if he derails the talks? Why would Trump want to disrupt talks with Putin? This is speculation for now, but it seems that Trump chose this form of action, although it is said that he often acts spontaneously.
Пока что я до конца переварить я это еще не переварил, но вот уже ощущение у меня такое есть, что вот та форма, которую он выбрал, а ведь у Трампа на самом деле, вот и говорят, ну он там спонтанно что-то делает.
He has spontaneous behaviors, but you saw the inauguration, right?
Вы же видели церемонию вступления в должность, да, инаугурации?
There wasn't a single spontaneous moment. Everything was planned down to the second, and from the looks of it, he'd been doing that planning for the last 2.5 months. That's why Trump is a very good negotiator. He's a tough negotiator and knows how to negotiate. If you humiliate a person before a negotiation, then you don't want that negotiation.
Перед началом переговоров, то ты либо не хочешь этих переговоров, то, ну, даже, строго говоря, сейчас для меня уже даже уже нет либо-либо.
He doesn't want these negotiations, and he has excuses. For example, he instructed Keith Kellogg to settle the issue with Ukraine in 100 days.
Потихонечку назначаются официально в администрацию, и он вот уже сказал Киту Келлогу, ты там за 100 дней, значит, мне должен регулировать вопрос с Украиной.
It's no longer Trump. It's his Ukraine advisor who will be doing this for 100 days. He has an excuse. When asked about a meeting with Putin, he says he doesn't rule out the possibility.
Он говорит, ну я не исключаю, наверное, встретимся, так сказать, мы как бы, так сказать, вопрос об этом идет.
The last good thing I heard from Trump was that the Ukrainian side managed to put an important thought in his head.
Это то, что украинской стороне удалось в его голову внедрить одну очень важную для Украины вещь.
Trump says Zelensky wants to make a deal. He wants the deal I'm offering him. That's it. Zelensky wants it. Now Putin is fighting back, but in my opinion, one should not immediately build illusions about this. He has no claims against Zelensky yet. In his head, Zelensky agrees to the deal. No one knows what the deal is. It's all very raw and unclear. In Trump's mind, Zelensky is ready, but Putin won't. He can put everything on the advisors, say, let them prepare the field for negotiations, and I'll get involved when everything is ready. That may be Trump's tactic in the coming weeks. Back to Davos, Trump said they are working on a ceasefire agreement between Russia and Ukraine. Back to the Kremlin's reaction to Trump's social media statement. Not only Peskov is reacting, but Russian propaganda is in a panic. We need to put out the fire immediately. Let's hear it for Skabiva. Trump issued an ultimatum to Russia and addressed Putin via an online letter. He began with compliments and professed his love for the Russian people. He then moved on to threats and promised new sanctions if Moscow didn't make a deal on Ukraine. Apparently, we need to meet that 100-day deadline. We are talking about the complete blocking of Russian exports to the United States and other countries. It's apparently about secondary and tertiary markets, because there is no trade with Washington. To understand, the U.S. imposed 2,295 new restrictions on Russia last year. I've noticed that the propaganda has changed tone. Now Biden is better than Trump, and Trump has become a systemic enemy. I didn't watch it, but what we heard completely confirmed my feelings. Trump provoked this reaction. The reaction is that he is an enemy, he made an ultimatum, and it follows that Putin cannot agree to such terms. Why some Trump with whom we have no economic ties? By the way, this is a lie. Russia has many ties with America. The Americans are still buying Russian uranium raw materials. They can't do without it. That's the tone. That is to say, war has begun. By the way, Trump said in his inauguration speech that he was a pacifist and would settle all disputes and end wars. This is his image, desire, and goal for 4 years. And immediately started many wars, including economic wars with Canada and Mexico. He started a war with Mexico on migrants, a civil war in the U.S. over harassment of enemies, and attempts to remove Biden from office. He has declared economic war on China, Western Europe, and now Putin. Trump is a pacifist, yet he has already declared almost 5 wars and argued with everyone. Kremlin propagandists write that Russia will not go for deals dictated by blackmail and threats. I wonder what Putin will do. He will continue to destroy Ukraine, but might he decide to confront NATO or the U.S.? He will never dare to engage in direct confrontation because he has never fought directly with NATO or the U.S. He is always at war with his friends and friends with his enemies. Trump has the same thing. He flatters Kim Jong-un and other dictators and makes claims like Canada with his friends. Canada is America's best friend. There is no closer partner except the UK, but it is far away, across the ocean. Canada is close, speaks the same language. Canadians consider their provinces part of the country. Trump has said that Canada could become the 51st state of the United States, but de facto it already is, although Canada has no intention of giving up sovereignty. It's nothing new that he's at war with his friends. But Putin, of course, with Trump's statement, could still come up with something. Yes, it was possible to create a distraction. Putin, by the way, congratulated Trump even before he took office to create an information occasion. He failed to do so because when he congratulated Trump at the Security Council, the news was mostly left to Russian and a bit of Ukrainian channels. Almost no one talked about it. All the attention was on Trump's inauguration in the U.S. Now Putin is trapped, and Trump has moved to dramatically escalate. Putin doesn't like that kind of aggravation. Trump doesn't like to be misunderstood. As a good negotiator, he knew that publicly insulting Putin would not make him give in.
В оскорбительной форме написать, значит, своему другу большому Владимиру, которого он сильно любит, и с которым у него отличные отношения в Москве, то, в принципе, это приведет к тому, что тот не сдастся.
Now we wait for developments, with popcorn, watching to see when things start to unfold.
Попкорном запасаемся и смотрим, причем
Putin will certainly not go to war with NATO or the U.S. The rest depends on how much strength he has to fight even in Ukraine, because despite the help from the Koreans, they're doing real bad. The military-industrial complex is not working well. No new tanks are being made. Old Soviet equipment is being restored. Everything is reduced to meat assaults and the use of planning bombs.